Why not? Oh, wait. That big was. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah. It's not the season. No, I think it was. No, actually, no, it was definitely. I'm giving you these chips. Sion, you want to sit like in the middle? I haven't like sit here. I like having a sidebar. Oh, what am I gonna put on here? I like. I mean, you have. Oh my God, sheet. Let me just see how many bags of chips. You probably don't want to do that, obviously. 7 bags. And then if you. Yeah. He texted out that they were going to give me some chips. Yeah. Wait. No, not all the way. No, I have one chip.
No.
Yeah, the other side. Yeah, the other side. Yeah, out here. You can go to the other end too.
Distance doesn't only mean evenly spaced.
The other side. The other side.
Wait, he told us to.
You can sit on the last row too. So. Yeah, you can sit on the other side.
I think we're gonna try.
No, the application to internship doesn't open. It's not open.
I know.
You're right.
Wait. Oh, really?
Audio or anything?
Can you get seated?
Recording in progress.
Too fat for this. Hey, Joel, are we ready to get started? Are we? Another minute, okay. We are missing one class, so maybe another minute for them to show up. In person, so good, so good. It's just not the same virtual.
Hello, just a quick thing. If you guys are going out that back door to use the restrooms that way, it's slammed shut. It's very distracting. Can you, when you leave, hold it quietly, and when you come in, pull it, let it close quietly as well? Thanks.
He takes that. Yeah, you were all having lunch. They were all there.
I know, I didn't see them here. Are they coming? Okay. Okay. We have a new course, the e-textile.
Oh yeah.
So weaving, some electronics inside. About 80% female students in the class. Okay, good. Okay, if you can sit down, please. E-textile class. Hey, so good afternoon. So today is Thursday. So you have 2 more days of BWSI. Are you sad? Yeah. So what is BWSI? Yeah. So today it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jerry Wohletz. He's been just an incredible supporter of BWSI from 2016. This program would not be what it is today without his support. So with that, let's give him a warm welcome. Oh, and he's also MIT alum. Forgot to mention that.
All right, thank you, Bob. Can everyone hear me all right in the back? Show of hands. All right, good. So this is going to be interactive. So you will participate. If you're in the audience, just yell it out. If you're online, put the message in and they'll relay it. So thank you again, Bob. So I've got a speech that I haven't given in 5 years, so I do have notes, so I apologize. I normally just ad hoc every briefing, but this one I'm actually gonna have a little more structure to it. So to get the ball rolling here, I wanna start off with the definition of leadership. Shout it out, what's leadership? Set it an example. Role models. We're going to get to that. The graphic will be explained at the very end of the presentation. Others? Matching responsibilities in the very, very back. All right, the ability to influence others. We're gonna pivot on that. There's one other part of the definition. Yes. Changing direction. I'm going to go with that one right there. Empathy, yes, part. But here's the definition. It's from the Harvard Business Review. The ability to develop a vision and inspire others to achieve great results. 2 parts to this vision. Right? Leadership is about painting a portrait of a brighter tomorrow. Right? No details. It's just a portrait. Consider it an impressionist portrait. And that is considered the what. The how is getting others to see the untapped potential in themselves and their team to go figure out the how to the what. So vision setting and inspiring together is an extremely rare commodity in this world. And therefore, it's called leadership. Now, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to talk about personal leadership. Take that definition, now apply it to yourself. The ability to develop a vision, inspire yourself to achieve great results. So with that, here's where the story begins, where I'm going to tell you about the results. So if I take a look here, as I stand here today, I'm the president and CEO of Draper Laboratories. Charles Stark Draper Laboratory, best known for the Apollo landing, right? And 91 years of history tied very, very closely with MIT. But you can see I've over 32 years in the aerospace and defense industry, a lot of different roles, including an entry-level engineer. At the next level of detail, if you take a look at the type of roles, not title, but roles, you see a variety of roles. And in this presentation, I will highlight thought leader, change agent, strategist, mentor. I've worked a lot of different places. I've worked at 2 large aerospace and defense company for profit. I've done 2 startups. I've spent time supporting the United States government. I've also spent time in academia, and I'm currently at Draper Laboratories, which is a nonprofit. And I've also had a series of honors and awards throughout my career. So the question I have is, how did I get here today? To answer this question, I got to take you back 2 decades ago when my assistant said, "You are exactly the image of a guy who grows up with a silver spoon in their mouth." And I was like, well, I ought to start telling people my story. So to begin this story, I'd like to take you back to where my wife and I were both from Kansas. We have 3 kids. Our oldest is 22, our middle one is 19, and our youngest is 15, and we live in Arlington, Massachusetts. Any Arlington? All right, just Joel. All right, you and I. So as typical families, we got a cat and a dog. I prefer the cat over the dog. My wife prefers the dog over the cat. And now, unlike the typical images of Kansas, right, we in fact grew up in a place called Kansas City, Kansas. And that is the typical view of where we grew up. So as you can imagine, most people that I talk to have no idea between the Midwest, Kansas, let alone Kansas City. So show of hands, how many people here are from the Midwest? All right, not a lot of hands. So given that there really isn't a good analogy of where my wife and I grew up, I have to kind of explain that to set the context of the story. So where we grew up, because I cannot find yet, and maybe there is, but I haven't come across yet an analogy to where we grew up in New England. And I have spent time in California. There are some closer analogies there, but certainly not in New England. So the environment is best described as high-density poverty, with all the challenges that that brings, including a lot of drugs and a lot of violent crime. The neighborhood that we grew up in is featured in shows like Cops and Kansas City SWAT. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen those shows, but it's not the most glamorous part of society. The common path was to graduate from high school, go to a community college or a VOTEC school, and then ideally get a job working for the city, the fire department, or the police department. But there was a bit of a problem. I was a struggling student. Now, what does that mean? Well, when I was in school, I actually had to go to summer school so that I could go from 3rd grade to 4th grade without staying in the 3rd grade. So now summer school today, like, people go to summer school now because they want to excel. But back in the 70s and 80s, that was a real badge of shame. And once you were branded as a stupid kid, you couldn't shake that. There was one more problem. I always found a way to get in trouble. And so a struggling student, always in trouble, what's the normal outcome? So around 6th grade, for reasons that I cannot explain why a 6th grader thinks about this, I started to extrapolate forward what happens to struggling students that find themselves in a lot of trouble. And there was quite a few examples around me of people living in a house without heat, in jail, or much worse. But at that time, I chose that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be an asset, not a deficit in this world. So I committed to myself to do better every day, But then I had to decide, what am I going to do? Then I had to decide, how am I going to do it? So as I tell my story, I'm going to tell you 6 fundamental reasons why I believe I am here before you today. All right, take it or leave it, but I'm just going to tell the story as it goes. So let's begin. So in 6th grade, I had a bold dream that I was going to be an astronaut. And I know a lot of kids decide that, right? But I actually went and started doing research on who are the typical astronauts. And I learned to be an astronaut, you're better off being a fighter pilot. Okay, I want to be a fighter pilot. Your best odds is if you went to a service academy. Well, that wasn't in the cards for me. Being ROTC, that wasn't in the cards for me. So it was go to a good engineering school and get an engineering degree, and ideally in aerospace engineering. Check, that's what I was going to go do. So my first recommendation is dream big. Don't play small ball. So every day I took a step forward to better myself while doing everything I could to avoid the trouble. I believe big dreams result in big steps, small dreams, small steps. Though I started to close the gap, by the time I graduated from high school, I was nowhere prepared for college. I hadn't taken all the necessary courses. My standardized tests were below minimum requirements to enter college, but I still had my dream, which takes me to my second recommendation. Second recommendation is take chances when the opportunities present themselves, and keep in mind the timing will always suck. The only reason I got admitted to the University of Kansas was because in the late 80s, the Kansas Region system had open admissions for residents. So because my parents paid taxes, I was granted 1 semester at a state university on probation. And so I accepted it, went there, was promptly put on probation, received all kinds of letters from the university about here's the helplines, don't do something rash. Oh, by the way, you're just here for a semester. So I was not able to be accepted to the aerospace engineering program because of how poor my grades were. Instead, I was enrolled in a pre-engineering course to prepare me for an engineering course, which was every morning at 7 a.m. I had classes. And it was packed full with nothing but weed out courses because the expectation was 1 semester, have fun, see you later. Recognizing this was my one shot, I did something that most freshmen don't do when they go to college. I studied 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. I had to properly learn how to read and write my freshman year in college. And though I had developed certain aptitudes in high school that made me well suited for my friends in the fraternities, I chose not to go down that path, albeit I didn't keep myself perfectly clean there. But I just simply studied. So at the end of my freshman year, I got straight A's. Not only did I get to stay, because if you didn't get a minimum of a C, you had to go. I got straight A's. And then I got something interesting. The university still sent me a letter. This time it wasn't about, hey, don't do something rash here. It was, you get straight A's, we pay. And I'm like, woohoo, because I really didn't have a plan on how I was going to pay. So that begat, and then how did it all end? It took me 5 years to do a 4-year degree because of how far behind I was. I got all A's but 2 B's in those 5 years. I graduated with highest distinction and was the speaker at the engineering graduation ceremony. So as I was approaching graduation, I took my flight aptitude test to be a fighter. And for both the Air Force and the Navy, and I did extremely well. But there was a very fortunate incident that occurred when I was in undergrad, which happened to be very unfortunate for me, and the Berlin Wall had fallen. And the aerospace and defense industry contracted 60%. And even if you went to the academies, no graduate from the academy received a slot in flight school, let alone a person who just graduated from the University of Kansas that did well on an exam. So I was faced with the difficult choice. Do I stay at KU, get a master's, wait it out? Do I had been accepted to MIT for grad school. Do I go there or do I go get a job? Which takes me now to my next one. So I started reflecting back on my transition from going from Kansas City, Kansas to the University of Kansas, and I recognized that leaving that comfort zone, and yes, it was a comfort zone, I was homesick, I was scared, but I reflected on the fact of how much I grew as an individual because I made that bold decision to step away. And I made a commitment to myself then to, I was going to repeat this exercise over and over. I was going to leave the comfort zone, and the University of Kansas was a comfort zone. So my third recommendation here is leave the comfort zones and go after diverse experiences. So now what did I do? So did I mention again that the economy was in really bad shape? Right, so I entered my profession as an aerospace engineer during literally one of the worst downturns since World War II. MIT was in chaos with the big budget cuts. The laboratories here that would normally take 40 students were taking 1 or 2. And so I was very, very fortunate to land a job 6 months after graduation. 2 Bs, all A's. Took me 6 months to get a job after graduation. But I was committed that I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. I still wanted to be a pilot. I still wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to support national security. So after 6 months, I joined McDonnell Douglas, and I got to join the design team for the F-18EF Super Hornet. Now, for those that watch Maverick, Top Gun Maverick, I helped design, one of many, design the wings of that aircraft. And I also got to support the legacy F-18CD Hornet and its operations. Absolutely fabulous job, worked with fabulous people, had a wonderful supervisor, but there was a little bit of a problem. I was the first engineer hired in 4.5 years at McDonnell Douglas after they laid off 8,000 engineers in 2 days. When I talk about a downturn, that's how brutal it was. I was the youngest person in an department of 400 engineers. The second closest person to me was 28. The 30-year-old engineers were still doing entry-level work, and the average age was in the upper 40s. And no one followed me. I was the one hire. So I decided I would first go over to the Phantom Works, where I became I went from an aerodynamicist to a structural engineer and control engineer. I got to, again, go work with absolutely some of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with in my career, and as well as supervisor. And in that process, I decided to go on leave of absence and go to MIT. And at that time, just to pursue a master's degree. So I show up to MIT, I am trained as an engineer, and now I'm in a community of some of the best and brightest aspiring scientists. Note, engineer, scientist, not the same thing. I recognized very quickly how far I was behind in the requirements to be a scientist. So I repeated my freshman year at University of Kansas, knuckled down. I did not enjoy Boston. 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, trying to get caught up so that I could actually pass the courses and, like KU, straight A's. I was able to secure funding from NASA. Very fortunate for that, and that took me, as well as the Air Force, and the requirement is that I had to go to an Air Force base each summer. So that would take me out to Dryden, NASA Dryden, or now called NASA Armstrong, or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. And I got to go work on X-planes, and I got to start doing flight testing, which was, again, fabulous. Through the encouragement of some professors here, again, I was here just for a master's. No aspirations going beyond that. They encouraged me to take the qualifying exam for a PhD. I studied 2 straight months, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, did play a lot of hockey in there, and took the doctoral exam, for which 1/3 of every person, that small group of people who got to take the exam, failed. And at that time, you had to believe in reincarnation because you got one chance in your entire lifetime. They have since changed that. I did one of the top scores on that exam, and then I was given permission now by Boeing, that had bought McDonnell Douglas, to extend my leave of absence for another 3 years, but no more. I was able to finish my coursework in about 1.5 years. My research, theoretical and experimental, proving that research, fortunate, a little lucky, in 1 year, I graduated with a PhD from MIT in 2.5 years. Now I'm supposed to return back to Boeing St. Louis and go work on this exciting program called the Unmanned Combat Air Vehicle. It had just come out of the classified world. I was going to be a flight control engineer doing reconfigurable controls, but we had already done that. I decided to go professional cliff diving again. So I quit a great job with a great company, with a great team, and I went and joined a MIT startup. And the company had a basic premise. It was grow your business, and a complete latitude on what I focused on. I got to choose it, but it was grow your business 20% per year on a $1 million basis to keep your job, to keep it. Anything less, you're gone. If you do better than that, they handsomely reward you. The company was AlphaTech. Again, I got to work with some amazing people at that time. So in 2000, I left campus, went and joined the startup, and started the new field of multi-vehicle control for UAVs. We call it autonomy today. Got the first publication, the first contract. It is actually a talk that I've given multiple times here at the Beaverworks. And what ended up happening was I had to learn everything about a business very quickly. I went from an individual contributor to a manager. I had to hire people. I had to develop them. I had to read contracts. I had to do security. I had to do everything. It was fascinating, wonderful experience. But I also recognized the awesome responsibilities. When you hire someone and they work for you, they have a mortgage to pay. They've got tuition to pay. You screw up, they're the ones that lose their job first. You create life events. And so as a leader, never, ever, ever forget the responsibility you have to not create life events for your employees. So how did I do? I was there in this role for 8 years. My average annual growth rate was 38%. The technology was deemed as a national asset, and it supports our national security to this very day. During this time, a company known as BA Systems bought AlphaTech, which takes me now to my next example. Oops, I should have forwarded through a little there. All right, again, you will notice everything in my career is an airplane or a rocket now. But that's how I see my career. I'm an aerospace engineer. It's all about airplanes and rockets. Okay, so now to BA Systems. I am now back in a large aerospace company. Remember, I left one, startup, and our company is now acquired, and I have now the golden handcuffs. For those that are in the startup community, if you get purchased, there are a certain number of individuals that you must be there for a certain period of time. Mine was 3 years before I could go anywhere. And so at that 3-year mark, I decided to go professional cliff diving again. But this time I chose it to do it instead of jumping off and doing another startup or going back to Boeing in St. Louis, which I came very close to doing. I decided to actually explore this very large international company, and I moved up to the electronic warfare business. Now, the only problem with this move was I come in now as a senior executive because of how I came in through the acquisition, and because of my contributions. They had no choice. I had the right to maintain my senior executive role, but now I joined the mainline company, and I am 20 years younger than any senior executive. How do you think that worked out? On top of that, the president who recruited me, that says, hey, we need fresh ideas here, recruits me in, retires abruptly 6 months later. And we had just entered the second major defense downturn in my career. So young, new, declining market, what type of jobs do you think I got? All right. So my next real strong recommendation is you can sit there and grouse and say life sucks, or you can sit there and say, what a golden opportunity, because I'm going to get all the hard assignments that no one else wants. And I can learn. I can not only do the job, but I can create that as my experimental laboratory in the process. So when I transitioned, I was doing profit and loss prior to startup company, but the company wasn't sure they could trust me. So they created a role for doing strategy. I'm like, fine, put me in a strategy role with no profit loss responsibilities. I went and got the syllabus of MBA strategy degree. I read the books and then applied it to the current assignment I was in. Developed a strategy where I committed to $3 billion of new revenue over a decade and then delivered 5. So great. Now their company is willing to trust me. So they gave me my first profit loss job, Director of Advanced Solutions. And guess what type of programs I inherited? All the programs losing money. Did I get the top talent? Nope. Who cares? Move on. We as a team put a strategy, we fixed the programs, and we had a blast, and I am close friends with most of them to this very day. Company got a little more confidence in me. Then we had this program, Next Generation Jammer. The Navy had told us we were in 4th place out of 4 competitors. And the company says, hey, we need to turn this around. I said, of course, I'll do that. Right? This sounds like a blast. We lost. And then after that loss, and I will return to this story, but after that loss, they were like, hey, you know, that was a tough 2.5, 3 years on you, right? A little overweight now. I still haven't lost it yet. And you need your rest and recovery job. So we're going to put you in this really cozy assignment. Director of Electronic Attack Solutions. 2 months in, weapon system canceled. Right? Another turnaround job. Fortunately, we were able to recover that. I'll talk a little later about that. And then the company says, hey, in this part of our electronic warfare, it's the largest product line in all US operations, and in fact, bigger than most of the VPGM jobs. You're gonna go be a director, and you need to make it more profitable. Got it, on it. And just dealt with the cards I had and just moved on, but used it as an experiment to learn. So on the far upper left, 8 years. The middle box after that, another 8 years, 5 assignments, which means I was in a different role in a lateral. No change in title, no change in pay, outside of the normal merit cycle. Every 18 months, I was on to a new firefighting job. And then finally, the company said, hey, you know what? We ought to make you a VP. So in the final 6 years at BA Systems, 2 roles, right? 4 years in one role, 2 roles in the next one. So I took all of R&D across BA Systems and authored Fast Labs, which is a model that most aerospace and defense companies mimic to this day. And then I took over a business where the Air Force was threatening to walk away from BA Systems because of some troubled program execution, and had that turned around in 2 years. And at that point, I decided to go professional cliff diving. So let me ask you now the following question. Show of hands, how many people can juggle? Come on, all right. That's not a lot, boy. Online, let me give you an idea, because we're gonna go this. How many people can juggle 3 balls? Keep your hands raised and drop it when you can no longer juggle 4. We've got 3 people in here that I can see. Keep them high, keep them high. 5 balls. We're now down to 1. Anyone online at 5 balls? No, okay. 6 balls. 6 is down. Anyone know what the record is for juggling? 26. I thought it was 11. I could be wrong though. I thought it was 11 because they do these competitions on this, and I think there's a time element to this as well. Okay, so President and CEO of Draper Laboratories. I'll just be very brief on this one. You've got to learn how to juggle 6 balls simultaneously, while simultaneously managing 6 major categories of stakeholders. So this book I'm referencing here, for those aspiring CEOs, and when you get to this, McKinsey wrote this book called CEO Excellence. It is your handbook. It is your being a CEO 101 handbook. It explains this. But think about that. Juggling 6 balls over 6 major stakes, not 6 customers. Stakeholders like shareholder, employees, community, customers, partners, the list, 6 of them. That's why this job is so hard. I've been in the job 2 years. We'll see how it turns out. Okay, all right. Going on to the next example that I have here. All right, this is the 5th one. And this one's really, really important. As you saw those roles at BAE, I transitioned into the firefighter, the change agent. There was a business issue. The leadership said, go fix that. All right? It required strategy. It required influence. But my lesson that I want to offer to you is don't go focus on the business result, go focus on the culture. The results will follow if you fix the culture. You can go fix the results as soon as you walk away, flash in the pan. You will get measured after you leave, not just while you're there, especially for these elevated roles. So you've got to think about the legacy. So now how do you focus on the culture? I'm a firm believer in what's called the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So as a new leader, like it or not, your reputation's already out there. You're already a known commodity, whether or not you've ever met the person or worked with them. And here's the way I view the world. 1/3 of the organization you're going to lead is hell or high water, they're following you. For whatever reason, they're in your supporter camp. And it doesn't matter what you do, they're not leaving you. 1/3 is sitting there saying, I cannot believe this buffoon has got the job. And there is nothing you can do to change that. Zero. So focus on the middle third that is confused, doesn't know what's going on, but they will eventually make a decision to join one side of this rope or the other. Your job is to go win the hearts and mind of that middle third and have them put their hand on the rope on the supporter side. And when you get 2/3 of the organization pulling in your direction, the others will fall. They will either get along, join the supporters just to get along, or they'll leave. Either way, you don't care. You've got 2/3 of the organization going in the direction that you need this company to go into. So never, ever, ever forget the 1/3 in the middle. Too many leaders will focus on their supporters. And they will go and invest in their supporters, but the supporters are never going to leave them, so why bother? Don't do something to really piss them off, don't get me wrong, but move on. All right, and here's the final one. And this one's pretty important. So if you go back and look at the biographies of some of the world's greatest leaders, what you will see is that their early experiences were fraught with failure. Pick a leader, right? Churchill, Caesar, Napoleon, Alexander the Great. I'm not sure there is anyone current age or living that fits that category, just saying. All right, me included. But you look at these for which history has written over and over and over about, fraught with failure early on. So I've got this phrase that always stuck in my mind, right? You win some, you learn from some. I'm not a big believer that you learn from winning, right? I am a big believer that you can learn from failure. When you do experience a setback, I think it is imperative that you take a moment, take a deep breath, and say, what happened and what could I have done differently? Then bounce, not just back, but bounce higher. So let me share 2 stories. First story, going back to my MIT days, my lab mate, Vlad, I will not say his last name. He's an aerospace and defense executive to this day. Probably be a little embarrassed about the story, but so therefore, anyone could probably piece it together. So he wanted to learn how to ice skate. And so I'm like, well, let's go over to the MIT rink. I gave him a few ice skating lessons, and I told him something very important. If you are not falling, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And it will take you longer to learn how to skate. Later that week, Vlad comes back in the laboratory, and he's got his hand in a cast. And I go, what happened? He goes, well, I followed your direction. I fell and I broke my pinky. So one caution I have is that there is a fine line between bold and stupid. Here's the part you got to remember. In the moment, you never know what side of the line you're on. Only time will tell. Be humbled by that. Only time will tell. You think you're being bold, only find out afterwards that, no, that was really stupid. Second, leadership is not for the faint of heart. You're here today because of the fire in your belly, but you recognize that this is a contact sport and people get hurt. So now let me take you back to that. We're in 4th place and we want to take that on, and I eagerly like, yeah, of course I could win that. So $4 billion program. We turned it around. It was a 2.5-year proposal. We restructured our offering, our team. We spent over $100 million of our own money, plus probably another 50 from our partner companies. The proposal was 25,000 pages long. And as I noted, we didn't win. And can you imagine the surprise when we were notified that we didn't win, when all indications were we had a superior technical solution at a lower cost? That was one lonely drive home that night, given that at these rolls, heads do have to roll. So fortunately for me, the GAO ruled that it was a flawed source selection, and I did not get fired. Pure luck. So now back onto, now I will tell you that how I conducted myself during that lengthy protest period spoke volumes to my team as well as the leadership. I sat back and reflected and acknowledged the mistakes I made and made sure everyone understood I owned it. I never once pointed the finger elsewhere. Though I was the guy who lost the big one, I used that experience and that learning for my immediate assignment, which I already told you 2 months in, the program got canceled. So I took the lessons learned from the big loss, applied it to that situation, and then orchestrated the biggest turnaround in this day to BAE Systems history. That has resulted in the fielding of a brand new weapon system called the EA-37 Bravo, the Compass Call, that is in operation for our nation today. That one also ended up in a GAO protest. We were on the other side of the protest, and we were likewise favorable in that outcome. So this now takes me back to the picture that was highlighted earlier. So if you want to be a great leader for others, it's got to start off with leading yourself. So again, to recap the 6. Dream big, don't dream small. Take your chances when the opportunity presents. Leave comfort zones and go after diverse experiences. Take the toughest assignments with the intent to learn. Focus on changing culture and the results will follow, and push yourself to experience failure early and often. Throughout this process, I'm a firm believer that if you want to lead others, it's got to start with yourself. You had better figure out what your values are, what your motives, what your communication style, and what your dreams are. I ask everyone that I mentor, what's your big dream? I am shocked with how few people actually have one. So I will also say that leadership is a contact sport. Often you do have to be that fish out of water. It's extremely lonely. But if you want to understand water, you got to be out of water to do that. And there's not a lot of people that are with you. Let me also leave you, let me also tell you about too many leaders skip this step of leading themselves. I personally try to do everything I can to stay away from them. If they haven't failed early and often and are comfortable talking about their failures, it makes me nervous. Those leaders lack authenticity, and without that authenticity, the ability to influence others diminishes. All leaders will make mistakes, and unfortunately, their mistake will be on the biggest stage. And when those mistakes happen, they create life events for others. So push yourself early and often. So I'll leave you with one final story here, and then I'll open it up to Q&A. So I'm graduating from MIT with a PhD. As the universities do, they reach into the local newspapers for notification. And one day, a reporter from the Kansas City Kansan called my parents to request an interview, as very few people graduate from MIT, let alone a PhD from Kansas City, Kansas. So my parents called me. I was reluctant, but I agreed to do it. The reporter went to my high school, Bishop Ward High School in Kansas City, Kansas, and wanted the reaction from the teachers on Jerry Wohletz graduating with a PhD from MIT. And one undisclosed teacher said, check your facts. So in all accounts, I shouldn't be here today with you. I would think the odds are astronomical, but let me suggest they may not be. Being a fish out of water implies that you need to believe in yourself and don't accept what others believe about you. Deal with the cards that you're dealt. Stop worrying about the cards you have. Day by day, work to improve yourself while constantly avoiding trouble. When you stumble, learn from it. Constantly look out for good luck. I certainly needed it. When luck presents itself, grab it and never forget it's luck. You have to be humble and recognizing that a lot of this is probabilistic based. When things don't go to plan, I'm not a fighter pilot. I'm not an astronaut, but I did design fighter aircraft. I did author weapon systems. I do work at a company that supports NASA on the Artemis program and the commercial lunar payload service contract for the colonization of the moon. I simply moved on to the next opportunity that aligned with my dream. Do I still want to be a fighter pilot and astronaut? Absolutely. And as I tell people, if they ever come knocking, I'm gone. So with that, I thank you, and I will now take questions.
Thank you. We'll start with.
I will warn you, I do have a second part that we will finish. So I'm going to have about, let's say, five minutes at the end to finish. So I see someone with their hand up. That's great. Jump up and grab a microphone.
Sigrid has some online questions.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll start with online questions. So when you experience failure after failure, how do you keep your chin up and head in the game?
So how do you keep your chin up, right? So I'm a firm believer, so I'm grounded in who I am and who I'm not. I don't need other people to validate me. So I don't give a shit about social media. I don't care. I don't even watch it, right? If people, again, I think about the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule all the time. So at the end of the day, you got to take a step back and say, are you a good person? How do you be a better person? And then move on. That's all you can do.
Thank you. Another question is, how can we learn to go outside our comfort zones? Do you have any general advice?
How do you learn to go outside a comfort zone? You just go do it. So do recognize that it's not like you leave a comfort zone. I mean, I say professional cliff diving, don't go jump off a cliff if you haven't done that and if you haven't trained for that. But the reality is in your business career, you go professional cliff diving, it doesn't work out. Guess what? There's all kinds of opportunities still for you. You just got to keep your head up and see them. There's always going to be setbacks. I would have never, ever been able to guess the trajectory that I went on to get to where I'm at today.
Thank you. This question says, if leadership begins with believing in yourself, how can you overcome imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome. Well, I'm just, so I can't reconcile imposter syndrome if it's about yourself. So if you are true to yourself, and so again, what's your big dream? What are you doing about your big dream? What's imposterous about that? Rest assured, when I told people I wanted to be an astronaut, I was going to be a fighter pilot, and I was going to get an engineering degree, I had people chuckle. When I said I was going to go to the University of Kansas and get an aerospace engineering degree, oh yeah, people chuckled. So that's not an imposter, right? You go work your hardest, and if you don't achieve it, you're still not an imposter over that. So again, this is where I think that there is a lot of, you really shouldn't care that much about what the other people think of you. Are you a good person? Are you doing good? If so, be good with it.
Great. We'll do one last virtual question. While being involved in leadership, how do you make challenging decisions and how do you keep group morale up?
All right, challenging decisions. Great question. So there is a process to follow in making the decision, and you got to understand what your role is as a leader. So very quickly, because I give an entire presentation about this one as well. Anyone in an organization should be able to raise their hand and say, hey, a decision is required. Anyone in an organization should be able to support the data collection for making a good decision. But a leader must decide when must a decision be made. If you made it too early, you denied yourself better data. If you made it too late, you just let nature make the decision. That's actually the hardest part of decision making, when. Then the leader must decide what. Remember how I said the word what? And you must articulate it. And my belief is that If you did your diligence in gathering data, you were diligent in winning the decision, I trust everyone will make the best decision with the data they had. Only time will tell whether that's a good decision. But you've got to be good with, not every decision is going to work out. All you can do is, was I diligent? And when the decision was made, was I diligent in the data? Did I listen to the data? And then you just got to be good at it and move on. And when new data arrives that was a really poor data, just like a feedback control system, you got to replan and move on. How do you keep morale up? You just be honest and transparent with everyone, the good and the bad. No thin and needles, no spin control. Just tell people like it's at. They're adults, they're intelligent, they'll get it. All right, inside the room here.
So that you mentioned that you have a wife and 3 kids. I was wondering how, on top of the 6 roles that you have as the president and CEO, do you balance your work and family life?
How do I, so balance work, there are some leaders that call it about an integration. So here, just to put this in context, what do I do after I leave here, go take a few phone calls, and then I will be coaching baseball in Arlington at Spy Pond. So it is a decision you make on how you manage your time. Who else is managing your time, especially as your CEO? Think about that. I have a board of directors, but beyond that, and I would say my wife and my board of directors are my bosses. But the reality is that you're in charge of your time. Be in charge. Don't be a victim to your calendar. All right, but yes, I will go coach a baseball game this evening. All right, yes.
So you have a vision, and to achieve that vision, you need to have a strategy that's well communicated to your team. What does your process look like communicating that to your team? Like, and how deep, I guess, into the organization, like, do your, I guess, employees or coworkers understand the strategy to detail? And then the second one's a little bit niche, but on the slide with the 6 plates, there was one where it said under like allocate resources, it said act like an outsider, and I was wondering what that meant.
Yeah, okay, so 2 quick, and by the way, that first question, that's a deep question right there. So I'll just tell you what I just did at Draper in my first 2 years. I came in and I had, let's call it 4 months to make an assessment and not paint purely the vision, but say we need to head in this direction versus this direction. We then formed teams, my entire leadership team, then fleshed that out. And this is all at the vision step. And then provided that to the board of directors so that they had ownership and fingerprints. And then we put a process in place. And by the way, 4 months in, I'm on a podium communicating to every employee, to our corporation members, to our customers, that we're heading in a different direction, which happened to be more aligned with our legacy. But there's a lot of work that has to happen here. So we put an annual strategy process in place. We have business planning processes in place. It's an iterative feedback control system using receding horizon control, since I'm a control guy. But it's a well-established approach to putting strategy in. You communicate nonstop. Every message that I send out is linked to that vision, to that strategy. I don't have any of the details. That's why I have a leadership team, and they have a leadership team, and they have a leadership team. You have to align all compensation, all rewards to the strategy. So just on July 1st was our new fiscal year. I released, as I've done every year, my objectives, and every single employee has to align their objectives to mine at the entry level. So there's a whole process that you have to put in place to achieve that. That was part 1. Part 2, real quick. What was the part 2? Oh, the 6 plates, yes. Be an outsider. So in particular, like if you're the board of director, don't wait for the hostile takeover to occur. Come in as the person that's always, challenging the company to do better. Don't wait for that situation to occur. Great set of questions.
How do you get the middle 1/3 to support you? Do you do it by like changing the culture?
Okay, so how do you get the middle 1/3? The reality is I actually don't do it. I recruit people in the organization that's in the supporter category, and they then go recruit them. So there's this notion of cultural coaches. And those aren't the people at your leadership level. So if you want to get entry-level people to say, hey, I'm on board, you got to go get other entry-level people to go recruit them. Does this make sense? A lot of social engineering. I will say a CEO job is a HR job, human resources. Actually, all I do is talk to people all day. It's amazing. But it is a HR job. So you got to go find, if you got a pocket that you know that isn't undecided, you got to go find someone they trust and get them to advocate for you. All right, 2 more questions and then we'll pivot and then we'll see how much time we have left. Yes. In my career, struggled with the most? Oh, in my life, struggled with most in my life. I have never been asked that question. Good news, no vices, right? Hard to do these jobs if you have a vice. But I basically would say it's very odd for me to be in this role. And so I talked to you about how lonely it is, but imagine this. You come from an environment where all your friends, whether they did the typical common approach or not, are there. Then you come to a place, you know, MIT, people from all over the world, no big deal. But then you go live in Arlington and you're now surrounded with all these other people that have all these different experiences. Then you go work in a company that has no Midwesterners in it. And they're all the typical, demographics of New Englanders. You're always an outsider. And even when you go back home, you no longer fit in because you're a New Englander now, let alone a CEO. So it is odd to reconcile and balance this where you really fit, and that's where I'll say like my wife, her and I have shared the same experiences. I literally have no idea how I would have done this without her. So, but it's odd because you fit in nowhere. All right, let's pivot.
We just have one question she's been.
Yes, okay.
My question was about your professional cliff diving. You mentioned several points in your career you would pivot and change course. What motivated you to do that? And what point in your career did you decide that it was wise to make a career change, pivot your direction, or when was it might have not been the best decision?
Yeah. So boredom. I'm not kidding, boredom. So, and maybe that's really, because, I'm always, so when I go to a job, I am very focused on make the change, get the leadership in place, leave that legacy. And then I get bored. And so I've never quite just settled into where, hey, I ought to kick back and actually enjoy the fruits of this. So we'll see if this is the first job that I actually do that. All right. There's an important part that we've got to get to, and I'm conscious of time.
Okay. So I am just gonna call up.
Hold on. Hold on, I got a little setup here.
And I say that because he's gonna tell you to do something I tell you never to do.
Okay. Interesting topic, or do you guys want to end now? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Just thought I'd check. All right. So here are five of the 7 graduates from last year's Summer Institute that interned at Draper Laboratories this summer. Just 5 of the 7. So just real quick, that's Draper, right? Again, Apollo program, a lot of other stuff. You can find us on the webpage, 91 years. You see that staff number? I got to double that in 5 years. Interest? Okay. So now, our number 1 responsibility as a nonprofit is our educational mission. This year, we had 202 co-ops and interns. You see how many employees? Let me go back. 202 co-ops and interns. We're going to take that to 250. We currently have a scholars program, and I got 2 slides coming up after this, that are fund master's and PhD students. This coming school year, we'll have 100 on our way to 250. So we're here supporting you. We hire, All right. High school, undergrad, master's, PhD. All right. So this is the point where you can pull your phone out and take a picture of this. Because it has important dates. Because in the internship program, you must apply early. So people say, well, what job am I going to work on? I don't know yet. It'll be figured out over time. But I will tell you, Andy Simcoe, who was in this course last year, is working on the guidance, navigation, and control algorithms for the replacement for the space shuttle called the Dream Chaser, which will do its first launch and rendezvous with the International Space Station either at the tail end of this year or next year. That's got to be pretty cool, huh? Okay. Now, when you graduate from your undergrad, and then you go for a master's or PhD, if that's what you desire to do, what you'll see is we have relationships with 19 universities. You would get an advisor from Draper and an advisor in the school. We have done this for 51 years. Okay. Now.
So for all you online folks, there are some virtual things that are going to happen, but not today. So don't be disappointed if you're virtually here and you haven't been selected. It may still happen. So we need Abby Dang, Madison Cardona, Janice Lynn, Stephanie Wan, Victoria, I'm not saying all of your names, and Gloria to stand right here.
This goes. This.
It doesn't go in any order, actually.
Okay, Abby.
That's me.
Right.
Thank you.
Madison.
Thank you.
Janice.
Yep.
All right, process Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Victoria.
Thank you.
Gloria.
Thank you.
All right, so these are your job offers for next summer. There are 7 more for our virtual for a total of 13. For everyone who didn't get it, don't be disappointed. You know how to apply. So this was based upon, right, the BeaverWorks staff and the work you've done this summer, including the coursework that leads up to this. So it's not mandatory, but this is, if you want to join us at Draper Laboratories next summer, we will gladly welcome you. All right? You want me? All right. And then I have some stuff for you as well. Oh. You may want to take your badges off. And you have to slide in. I think they want us.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, here you go.
And then
Group shot.
we have T-shirt presenters.
Yes. We have the T-shirt presenters.
Yes.
All right.
So then we have a couple of students from Race Car who have a T-shirt for you.
I'm there first. Oh, yeah. Dr. Wohletz. Oh, wait.
Hi. Okay, it's on.
Dr. Wohletz, thank you so much for your talk today. I'm Chris Cal from Race Car.
I'm Laura, also from Race Car.
Thank you for your talk today. We really liked how you were sharing all your advice about going on, sharing your life story and telling us how to just like get outside of your comfort zone and take on any shots you've got.
Wow. Last but not least, right, race car. Dr. Wohletz. I've heard many great things about you from the Draper interns. I'm very honored to have the opportunity to hear one of the many infamous Jerry talks. I would, I love to support you in doubling your employees somewhere in the future. But
Very well.
I loved your advice during your speech, and we hope that this BeaverWorks t-shirt will be just as awesome.
Yes, thank you very much. Come on. You can start. All right, well, thank you very much.
One more picture.
One more picture? Okay. Where do you want me?
Can stand here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Do you know how to dab someone up?
Do I know how to do what?
Dab someone up.
No.
Okay, here, you hold your hand out like this. You cup it a little, and then like, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.